Midnight, October 1956. In a smoke-filled room in a secret villa just outside Paris, representatives from 3 nations are gathered. They are redrafting a plan that will not only shake the entire Middle East to its core, but will also betray an entire country. Why were Britain, France, and Israel all plotting against Egypt? And what, exactly, were they trying to steal? The answer is a story of ambition, betrayal, and the explosive end of an era. To understand this secret plot, we first need to understand the man at the center of it all, Gamal Abdel Nasser. After decades under British influence, Egypt was finally charting its own course, and at the helm was President Nasser, a charismatic leader who quickly became a powerful symbol of Arab nationalism and pride. He envisioned a new, modern Egypt, free from the shackles of old colonial powers. In 1956, Nasser made a move that sent shockwaves across the globe. He announced the nationalization of the Suez Canal for Britain and France, who had controlled the canal for nearly a century. This was an outrage. The canal wasn't just a waterway, it was the economic lifeline of Europe. Over 2/3 of the continent's oil flowed through it. Nasser had just seized control of their most vital artery, and they were not going to let it go without a fight. But this crisis was about more than just a canal. Each of the 3 nations conspiring against Nasser had their own hidden motives. For Britain, it was about reclaiming lost glory and economic stability. Prime Minister Anthony Eden saw Nasser as a new Mussolini, a dictator who had to be stopped. He was obsessed with the idea that Britain's status as a world power depended on controlling the canal. Without it, the British economy would crumble. France had its own reasons. They were locked in a brutal colonial war in Algeria and were convinced that Nasser was arming and funding the Algerian rebels. For them, toppling Nasser was essential to winning their war and preserving their empire. And then there was Israel. Surrounded by hostile Arab nations, the young state saw Egypt's growing military strength, especially with new arms from the Soviet bloc, as a direct existential threat. They believed a preemptive strike was necessary for their survival. All 3 saw Nasser not just as a problem, but as a threat that had to be eliminated. The stage was set for a conspiracy. That brings us back to that secret meeting in the French villa. Over 3 days, officials from Britain, France, and Israel hammered out a deceptive plan, a masterpiece of political theater. It became known as the Savers Protocol. The plan was as simple as it was treacherous. Step 1. Israel would launch a full-scale invasion of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, pushing towards the Suez Canal. Step 2. Britain and France would then play the role of peacemakers. They would issue an ultimatum to both Israel and Egypt, demanding they cease fire and withdraw their forces from the canal zone. They knew Egypt, being the victim of the attack, would refuse. Step 3. Egypt's refusal would be the perfect pretext. Britain and France would then launch their own military intervention, supposedly to separate the warring armies and protect the canal, but their real objective was to seize the canal and overthrow Nasser. They gave it a code name, Operation Musketeer, but a better name for it is Operation Backstab. They were about to lie to the entire world, claiming they were peacekeeping, when in reality, they were launching a coordinated, pre-planned invasion. On October 29, 1956, the plot was set in motion. Israeli forces stormed across the border into the Sinai, advancing with lightning speed. Just as planned, London and Paris issued their phony ultimatum. As expected, Nasser defiantly rejected it. With their manufactured excuse now in place, British and French bombers began pounding Egyptian airfields, destroying most of Egypt's air force on the ground. Then came the main assault. Paratroopers descended on key positions around the canal. The city of Port Said, at the mouth of the canal, was subjected to a heavy naval bombardment. Chaos erupted as invasion forces landed. To the outside world, it looked like a messy, escalating conflict. But behind the scenes, it was a perfectly synchronized 3-pronged attack, designed to decapitate the Egyptian government. But the conspirators had made a critical miscalculation. They underestimated the will of the Egyptian people and their leader. Nasser refused to surrender. In a fiery radio address that rallied the Arab world, he declared, "We will fight. We will never bow." He made a tactical decision that stunned the invaders. He ordered Egyptian crews to scuttle their own ships, dozens of them sinking them in the Suez Canal, completely blocking the very prize Britain and France had come to seize. It was a brilliant act of defiance. The waterway was now useless to everyone. In the streets of Port Said, what was meant to be a swift takeover turned into brutal urban warfare. Egyptian soldiers and armed civilians fought back fiercely, house by house, slowing the invaders' advance. Nasser had turned the tables, transforming a military defeat into a powerful political and symbolic victory. The fallout from the invasion was immediate and seismic. The biggest shock came from the United States. President Eisenhower was absolutely furious. He had been kept in the dark by his closest allies. The secret plot threatened to destabilize the entire Middle East and push Arab nations straight into the arms of the Soviet Union. Compounding the crisis, the Soviet Union, seeing an opportunity, threatened to intervene with military force, even hinting at rocket attacks on London and Paris. The world held its breath, teetering on the edge of a much wider war. The United Nations General Assembly overwhelmingly condemned the invasion and aggressively pushed for an immediate ceasefire. The international pressure, especially from the US, became unbearable. Eisenhower used America's ultimate economic weapon. He threatened to crush the British economy by selling off the US government's sterling bond holdings, which would have caused a catastrophic collapse of the pound. Checkmated and humiliated, Britain had no choice. Prime Minister Eden, his health and political career shattered, announced a ceasefire and a withdrawal of British forces. France was forced to follow suit. The ground operation had lasted just over a week before collapsing in disgrace. Israel, after securing its military objectives in the Sinai, was eventually also forced to withdraw under immense US pressure. Operation Backstab had failed. The intricate, secret plot had completely unraveled on the world stage. For Britain and France, it was a political disaster of historic proportions. So who really won the Suez Crisis? Nasser, the man they had conspired to destroy, emerged as an undisputed hero across the Arab world. He had stood up to the old colonial powers and won. The Suez Canal remained firmly under Egyptian control. For Britain and France, the outcome was global humiliation. The crisis exposed their waning influence and their inability to act without American approval. It was a brutal lesson. The British Prime Minister was forced to resign. The French government soon fell. More than anything, the Suez Crisis marked a definitive turning point in history. It was the moment the sun finally set on the British and French empires. Their era of global dominance was over, replaced by the new superpower dynamic of the United States and the Soviet Union. Operation Backstab was designed to steal Egypt and preserve an empire. But in a stunning twist of irony, it ended up stealing the power and prestige of the old empires themselves. This secret plot, hatched in a smoke-filled room, didn't just fail to achieve its goal, it accelerated the very future it was trying to prevent, reshaping the map of global power forever.